Good morning, South Bend. Thanks for listening to WLA Radio. We're at 92.5 on the FM band, and this is your morning mashup. Hey, if you're just tuning in, I'm your host, the Reverend Will the Thrill, preaching a gospel of peace, love, and a wide variety of really good music to get you through your morning commute. You just heard Golden Earring's 1974 classic, Radar Love. Before that, we played some Glenn Miller, a little Elvis Costello, Peter Tosh, and, of course, what would Monday morning be without the Mamas and the Papas? On deck, we've got tunes by AC/DC, Big Mama Thornton, the Rolling Stones, my personal favorites, and off the request line, all four movements of Mozart's Jupiter Symphony. Hey, if there's something you'd like to hear, give us a call at 1-800-448-4373, and we'll see what we can play for you. That number again is 1-800-448-4373. We'll get back to some good music in a few moments, but I wanted to pontificate a bit. I was singing along during Radar Love a little bit ago, and I'm sure most of you were as well. And I started thinking about the line, it's 4:30 and I'm shifting gears. And I realized how irrelevant that line is to so many people out there these days. A few years ago, I was looking up information about hybrid cars on the internet. Not that I could afford to buy a new car then or now. I was just kind of curious. I checked out the Toyota website, which is what everyone in my immediate family drives. I was looking at the Prius, and I was just absolutely appalled to discover that you could not get a hybrid car without a manual transmission, at least not from Toyota. And I realize I'm not going to win any elections by saying this, and I actually hate to do so, but if that's the case, then screw the environment. I mean, my first instinct after seeing this was to come to the conclusion there are two kinds of people in this world. Those who can drive a stick shift and those who don't really know how to drive a car, not to impugn anyone's skill behind the wheel of a moving vehicle. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized there are actually two types of drivers. Those who drive to get from point A to point B, and those who actually relish the journey and might be trying to get someplace else entirely. And most of us who love to just get out on the open road, at least people I know that love to just drive, prefer a stick shift to an automatic. It was a few years prior to that discovery that I realized I fall into the category of people who truly love to drive. One weekend I just rented a vehicle, disappeared for a weekend, didn't tell anyone where I was going, got a room in a motel, and just disappeared for a weekend. And as I was driving home 2 days later, I put a recently purchased Bruce Springsteen CD in the car stereo system. So I was driving south along US 31, which is essentially miles and miles of nothing but miles and miles. I see my engineer Jimmy laughing in the control booth. He knows what I'm talking about. I really started to get into the music. I was starting to jam and discover just how great Bruce Springsteen is to drive to, but I realized that something was missing. I tried pounding the steering wheel and in time to the music. My left leg was bobbing up and down on the floorboards. I even punched the air around the empty passenger seat, but no matter what I did, that void was still there. I realized the problem was that I couldn't shift gears. A few weeks later, my father let me test this new theory of mine in his manual pickup truck. As I drove down the open highway and finally got to experience the visceral pleasure of shifting into the upper gears while rocking out to Badlands and Adam Raised a Cain, I found my theory to be true. Bruce Springsteen, particularly with the E Street Band, sounds better in a stick shift. I should point out as well that this was an incredibly generous thing for my father to let me do, especially with him in the passenger seat, because the first time he heard me listening to Bruce Springsteen, he said, "I thought I raised you better than that." That's another pontification for another time. But as time progressed, I discovered that any music I would classify as driving music, the Stones, AC/DC, Meatloaf, what have you, sounds better in a stick shift. And with this, I began to savor the drive. It became a very tactile experience for me. I like putting in the clutch and shifting gears. I like just putting my hand on the gear lever and resting it there while I drive. It's all part of the experience. When I get behind the wheel and get into about fourth gear on the open highway with the right song coming out of the speakers, I get this maniacal grin on my face and sometimes let out a demented laugh as if I'm James Bond and have just escaped from enemy forces. Once or twice, I've even let out a howl not too dissimilar to that of D-Day at the end of Animal House. And in moments like that, there is no place I would rather be than behind the wheel of a car. I actually pity those who never learn to drive anything other than an automatic. It's because of them that I can't rent a car with a manual transmission. It's because of them that hybrid cars are only available in automatics. I contend that there is no artistic value to driving an automatic. I don't care how much better it is for the environment. That's right, I said it. There's an art to driving a stick. With an automatic, it's just point and shoot. And if you've got cruise control, all you have to do is point. With a stick, you have to know what gear you're in and what gear you need to be in or should be in for that curve in the road up ahead. You need to be able to know how to get into those respective gears and when to be in them. And as I said, it's a tactile experience, and you just don't get that in automatic. The romance of the journey, to me, is lost in an automatic. I still argue that there are too many of us out there who prefer stick shifts, that engineers will have to develop some way of incorporating a manual transmission into an electric motor or whatever we're using in the future. It can't be impossible. After all, we have two benchmarks in science and technology, and we achieved both of them before I was even born. There's a general consensus that since we've put a man on the moon, there's nothing we can't accomplish. And why not? Seriously, I mean, if we can put a man on the moon, there's no reason I can't drive a hydrogen-powered car with a manual transmission. Frankly, I think that would be the greatest thing since sliced bread, which apparently is the second greatest scientific and technological benchmark in our history. Please, for the love of all that is sacred and holy, do me this solid favor and leave me my manual transmission. So with that in mind, let's get back to some driving music for those of you in transit, especially if you're driving a stick shift. Here's the title track from Meat Loaf's 1977 classic, Bat Out of Hell, on 92.5 WLA Radio. How was that? Does that work for you guys? Cool.